Perhaps I should begin with a kind of personal story, which is how I came to London from the Middle East, and had lived in Beirut and had really been introduced to politics there through the left, which was probably more connected to France at the time, and to working with the newly formed magazines like Tel Quel and the Gallimard Press and all of this. And so in those early days when I read Sartre and Fanon, it really transformed my way of thinking, but that was predominantly about national struggles. So when I came to London, it was just the beginning of the women's movement, and I sort of brought that baggage with me of the so-called male left. And so the first thing I wrote for the Shrew magazine, which is the publication of the Women's Liberation Workshop, was national liberation and women's liberation. And so one of the legacies of that position, that the group that I belonged to, called the History Group, really supported as a tendency in the movement, was this idea that the women's movement could be separate but not autonomous. So things like national liberation struggles, especially the anti-war movement in Vietnam, and importantly the trade union movement, which was really at a high point of power, I think, and contestation at that time, that we also had to be involved in that. And in our early local groups, we became involved in organizing women, low-paid women workers who were in the night cleaning business, which led to the making of the film Night Cleaners. But that kind of contact with the unions also led to thinking about organizing artists. And in the artists union, because I was elected the first chairperson by accident because there were two men who split the vote, and so it went to me. So then we made women's issues a priority, and we set up a women's workshop. And in the women's workshop was where I met Kay Hunt and Margaret Harrison, and where we decided to do the project on women in work. What we discovered with the Night Cleaners film, of course, they were going to work at night because they were busy looking after their children in the day. And this was compounded by the research that we did for women in work. And in Women in Work, there are some interviews that we did with men in the factory and women in the factory, where the men describe everything they do at work and not one thing about what they do at home. And the women don't talk about work at all. They only talk about what they do at home. So it was certainly supporting an idea that the social sexual division of labor was supported by a division of labor in the home. There was something else going on that made that division of labor seem natural and expedient, So it was rationalized in a way that was deeply psychological. So that's when I started to think about it, not just as the setup of social relations in relation to the industry itself or the workplace, but an intersubjective relation between the woman and her partner and her children, and that's what made it kind of more complicated and led me to do a postpartum document. In the women's movement at that time, there was a debate, maybe of Selma James' work at the time, it was about domestic labor and the idea of paying for it, like having it recognized by having wages for housework. That was their agenda. But the tendency I was part of, coming out of the history group, that had Juliet Mitchell just starting to, write psychoanalysis and feminism, and Laura Mulvey just writing the very first thing that she ever wrote on the Miss World, and all of us recognizing that it wasn't as simple as just getting wages for housework. It was trying to understand much more about what that relationship entailed, because of course there's pleasure and there's affect, and it's just not like you want to give your child to somebody and say, take care of them or pay me for kind of doing this. No. It was, I think, a point of recognizing the degree of consciousness raising that's necessary to transform those sexual relations. And now you're finding it wasn't over. It never was over. They tried to tell you it was post-feminist and it was all different now. But a lot of things stayed in place because that doesn't end. And of course, even with the legislation, it was a great surprise that things can be whittled away. But at least that's more tangible, and like the ways that educational institutions and corporations, the way that they've been able to kind of legislate for sexual harassment and assault. That actually, is something which is, again, tangible and exemplary in terms of trying to fight for something that is more encompassing, something that's kind of federal in scope.